In the sun-kissed realm of Sicily, Emperor Frederick II envisioned a Holy Roman Empire reborn, not as a collection of squabbling duchies and bishoprics, but as a unified realm under a single, strong hand. His court in Palermo was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, a testament to his ambition and intellect. Frederick, a scholar and a visionary, pored over ancient texts, seeking inspiration and justification for his imperial dreams. He believed in the power of law and reason, and sought to implement a system of governance that would transcend the petty rivalries of the age. But Frederick's ambition was not without its enemies. In Rome, Pope Innocent IV watched the emperor's growing power with increasing alarm. The papacy, long accustomed to wielding both spiritual and temporal authority, saw Frederick's centralizing tendencies as a direct threat to its own power. The conflict between emperor and pope escalated. Excommunications were hurled like thunderbolts, alliances were forged and broken, and the very foundations of Christendom seemed to tremble. Frederick defied papal authority, asserting his right to rule without interference from Rome. To assert his dominance, Frederick led his armies into Italy, the traditional heartland of the Holy Roman Empire. He sought to crush the rebellious Lombard cities and bring the peninsula under his firm control, further inflaming his conflict with the papacy, which held considerable sway in the region. The Pope responded with the full weight of his spiritual authority, formally deposing Frederick and calling upon the German princes to elect a new emperor. The schism within the empire deepened, threatening to tear it apart. In the German territories, the princes found themselves caught between two powerful forces. They resented Frederick's attempts to curtail their autonomy, yet they also feared the papacy's overreach. The seeds of future fragmentation were being sown. Recognizing the shifting tides, Frederick made a fateful decision. In the *Confoderatio cum Principibus Ecclesiasticis of 1220 and later concessions, he granted significant privileges to the German princes, both ecclesiastical and secular, effectively relinquishing imperial control over many aspects of governance in their territories. This act, while intended to secure their loyalty against the Pope, would ultimately weaken the imperial authority and pave the way for greater decentralization. Powerful figures like Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, a staunch advocate for princely autonomy, skillfully navigated the complex political landscape, ensuring that the concessions granted by Frederick were enshrined and expanded upon. The princes recognized the opportunity to solidify their own power, often at the expense of the emperor. The Holy Roman Empire was becoming a tapestry of independent entities, each jealously guarding its own rights and privileges. The dream of a unified empire under a strong central authority was fading, replaced by the reality of a fragmented and decentralized realm. Frederick, despite his ambitions and his initial successes, found himself increasingly entangled in Italian affairs and forced to make concessions in Germany. The seeds of fragmentation had been sown, and the fragile crown of the Holy Roman Empire was beginning to crack. The stage was set for the interregnum, a period of imperial vacancy and intense competition that would further expose the weakness of the imperial office and accelerate the empire's descent into decentralization. The legacy of Frederick II, the brilliant and ambitious Sicilian emperor, would be a paradox, a ruler who sought to strengthen the empire, yet inadvertently contributed to its unraveling. The year is 1250. In the Sicilian town of Fiorentino, Emperor Frederick II, the Stupor Mundi, breathes his last. His death plunges the Holy Roman Empire into a period of unprecedented turmoil. The strong hand that had, however imperfectly, guided the empire is now still, leaving a gaping void. News of Frederick's death spreads rapidly, reaching even the distant corners of the empire. The great Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, a man of considerable influence, contemplates the implications. Without a clear successor, the delicate balance of power threatens to unravel. Rival claimants emerge, each backed by powerful factions. William of Holland, Richard of Cornwall, distant relatives and ambitious nobles, vie for the throne, their legitimacy questionable, their support fractured. The imperial crown becomes a prize to be fought over, not a symbol of unity. Amidst the chaos, shrewd rulers like Rudolf of Habsburg bide their time, focusing on consolidating their own power base. The interregnum offers opportunities for ambitious families to expand their territories and influence, further fragmenting the empire. Pope Innocent IV watches these developments with keen interest from Rome. The absence of a strong emperor presents an opportunity for the papacy to assert its own authority and influence in imperial affairs, further complicating the already convoluted political landscape. The German princes, ever protective of their autonomy, exploit the power vacuum to expand their own rights and privileges. The imperial authority, already weakened by Frederick's conflicts with the papacy, continues to erode. Open warfare erupts between the supporters of the various claimants, plunging parts of the empire into anarchy. Towns are besieged, fields are burned, and the common people suffer under the weight of endless conflict. Despite the political chaos, life continues in the free cities. Merchants trade, artisans craft, and the burghers of these independent communities strive to maintain order and prosperity within their walls. Rudolf of Habsburg, unlike the other claimants, focuses on strengthening his family's holdings in Austria and Swabia. He understands that true power lies not in the empty title of emperor, but in the control of land and resources. The papacy attempts to mediate between the rival claimants, but its efforts are largely unsuccessful. The princes, suspicious of papal interference, prefer to pursue their own interests. The Great Interregnum drags on for decades, a period of instability and fragmentation that profoundly alters the character of the Holy Roman Empire. The dream of a unified, powerful realm fades further with each passing year. As the empire flounders, Rudolf of Habsburg patiently builds his power, preparing for the moment when he can finally step forward and claim the crown. He understands that the future of the empire lies not in grandiose ambitions, but in pragmatic consolidation and the shrewd exercise of power. The interregnum has taught a harsh lesson, the fragility of power in a land divided. The interregnum had exposed the fragility of the imperial crown. After decades of shifting alliances and power grabs, the electors of the Holy Roman Empire gathered near Frankfurt in 1273. The choice before them was critical: to select an emperor who could restore order, or to continue down the path of fragmentation. Among those vying for the position was Rudolf of Habsburg, a count with growing influence in the southeastern territories. The Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, a man known for his pragmatism and political acumen, played a crucial role in swaying the electors. He recognized that the empire needed a leader who was both capable and willing to compromise. Grand ambitions and Italian adventures had bled the empire dry. Stability was the need of the hour. Rudolf's election marked a shift in imperial priorities. Unlike Frederick II, who sought to build a centralized empire stretching from Germany to Sicily, Rudolf understood the limitations of imperial power. He recognized the strength of the princes and the free cities and chose a different path: consolidation of Habsburg power within his hereditary lands, primarily Austria. Vienna became the center of Rudolf's attention. He focused on establishing firm control over Austria, Styria, and other territories, strengthening his family's position and laying the foundation for future Habsburg dominance. This pragmatic approach, while beneficial to his own dynasty, had profound implications for the Holy Roman Empire as a whole. Rudolf's decision to prioritize Habsburg interests over grand imperial ambitions was not without its critics. Many princes felt neglected, believing that the emperor should be focused on the welfare of the entire realm, not just his own family's holdings. Concerns arose that the imperial office was becoming secondary to dynastic concerns. Despite his focus on Habsburg lands, Rudolf recognized the importance of maintaining relationships with the powerful free cities of the empire. He understood that their wealth and influence could be a valuable asset, and he sought to cultivate their loyalty through strategic alliances and favorable trade agreements. Cities like Nuremberg, Augsburg, and Cologne thrived during this period, gaining increasing autonomy and influence within the empire. Their wealth, derived from trade and manufacturing, allowed them to challenge the authority of the territorial princes and to negotiate directly with the emperor. The delicate balance of power within the empire required constant negotiation and compromise. The electors, wielding their power to choose the emperor, became increasingly influential in shaping imperial policy. They sought to protect their own interests and to ensure that the emperor did not overstep his authority. Rudolf's reign was marked by a series of political maneuvers, strategic alliances, and calculated concessions. He understood that maintaining stability within the empire required a delicate balancing act, and he was willing to compromise when necessary to achieve his goals. The papacy, though weakened after its struggles with Frederick II, continued to exert influence within the empire. The Pope watched with concern as the power of the princes and free cities grew, fearing that the empire would descend into complete anarchy. He also recognized the growing strength of the Habsburgs and their potential to challenge papal authority. External threats, such as incursions from neighboring kingdoms and internal conflicts between rival factions, continued to plague the empire. These challenges further strained the already fragile political structure and reinforced the need for strong local defenses. Rudolf's legacy was complex. While he brought a measure of stability to the empire, his focus on Habsburg interests contributed to its long-term fragmentation. The Holy Roman Empire remained a patchwork of independent territories, held together by a delicate web of alliances, rivalries, and the symbolic authority of the imperial crown. The mid-14th century saw the Holy Roman Empire grappling with the consequences of its fragmented power structure. The interregnum, though past, had left a deep scar, highlighting the urgent need for a more formalized and stable system of imperial elections. It was from this need that the seeds of the Golden Bull were sown. Emperor Charles IV, King of Bohemia, recognized the inherent instability in the electoral process. He understood that the ambiguity surrounding the selection of the emperor-fueled rivalries weakened imperial authority and invited foreign interference. A comprehensive legal framework was needed, one that would clearly define the roles and responsibilities of the electors. The negotiations surrounding the Golden Bull were fraught with challenges. The 7 electors, the archbishops of Mainz, Trier, and Cologne, the King of Bohemia, the Count Palatine of the Rhine, the Duke of Saxony, and the Margrave of Brandenburg, Each sought to protect and expand their own privileges. Debates raged over issues of precedence, voting procedures, and the extent of imperial authority. After years of debate and compromise, the Golden Bull was finally promulgated in 1356. The document, written in Latin, consisted of 31 chapters outlining the electoral process in meticulous detail. The Golden Bull explicitly named the 7 electors who would henceforth hold the sole right to choose the King of the Romans, who would then typically become the Holy Roman Emperor. This formalized a system that had been evolving for centuries, solidifying the power of these select few. The bull also established the principle of territorial indivisibility for the electoral principalities. This meant that the electoral territories could not be divided among multiple heirs, ensuring the electors maintained their power and influence across generations. While the Golden Bull strengthened the position of the electors, it also implicitly acknowledged the growing autonomy of the free cities and other territorial entities within the empire. The emperor's ability to directly control these entities was further diminished. The Golden Bull curtailed the emperor's judicial authority by granting the electors the right to their own high courts. This further limited the emperor's ability to intervene in the internal affairs of the electoral territories. The papacy, though not directly involved in the creation of the Golden Bull, recognized its implications for the balance of power within the empire. The formalization of the electoral process reduced the potential for papal interference in imperial elections, a long-sought goal of many German princes. The Golden Bull did not resolve all the internal conflicts within the empire. Rivalries among the electors persisted, and the emperor's authority remained limited. However, it provided a framework for a more stable and predictable succession process. The emperor's grand vision of a centralized empire, the dream of a new Rome, remained largely unrealized. The Golden Bull, while intended to bring stability, ultimately formalized the decentralization of power, solidifying the authority of the territorial princes and free cities. The Holy Roman Empire, even with the Golden Bull, remained a complex and decentralized entity. The emperor's power was circumscribed, his authority dependent on the cooperation of the electors and the willingness of the territorial princes to abide by imperial law. The dream of a unified German nation remained elusive, a distant hope for future generations. Rudolf of Habsburg, though emperor, understood that true power lay not just in the imperial title, but in the strength of his own lands. His focus shifted eastward, consolidating Habsburg holdings in Austria and laying the foundation for a dynasty that would outlast the fragmented empire. In Bavaria, the Wittelsbach dukes, shrewd and ambitious, carved out their own sphere of influence. Through strategic marriages, economic policies, and calculated alliances, they transformed Bavaria into a powerful regional force, often acting independently of the emperor's will. The rise of the Luxembourg dynasty in Bohemia exemplified another form of princely power. Charles IV, King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, used his authority to elevate Prague to a center of learning and culture, solidifying Bohemian influence within the empire and securing the crown for his lineage. The Diet, the assembly of the princes, became a crucial forum for negotiating the balance of power. Here, the princes voiced their grievances, asserted their rights, and often challenged the emperor's authority, shaping the laws and policies of the empire through collective action. The powerful archbishoprics like Cologne, Mainz, and Trier held immense sway, not just spiritually but also politically. Their archbishops, often prince-electors, wielded considerable influence in imperial affairs, carefully guarding their ecclesiastical privileges and territorial possessions. The free cities, like Nuremberg and Augsburg, flourished as centers of trade and industry, gaining considerable autonomy through charters and imperial privileges. Their wealth and independence made them important players in the empire's political landscape, often forming leagues to protect their interests. The Golden Bull of 1356 formalized the role of the 7 prince-electors, solidifying their power to choose the emperor and granting them significant privileges. This further decentralized the empire, as the electors sought to protect their own interests when selecting a new ruler. The dream of a unified and powerful empire, once envisioned by Frederick II, faded further with each passing year. The centrifugal forces of princely ambition and territorial fragmentation proved too strong to overcome. The princes, secure within their territories, focused on consolidating their power, building fortifications, and establishing their own legal and administrative systems. This inward focus further weakened the emperor's ability to exert central control. The lives of the common people were often shaped by the decisions of their local rulers, who held sway over their taxes, laws, and even their personal freedoms. The fragmentation of the empire meant that conditions varied greatly from one territory to another. The papacy, though still a powerful force, watched as the empire continued to devolve into a patchwork of independent states. The dream of a unified Christendom, with the emperor as its secular leader, seemed increasingly distant. The Holy Roman Empire, a complex tapestry of competing loyalties and fragmented power, continued its slow drift towards decentralization. The emperors, often strong rulers in their own right, struggled to maintain even a semblance of unity amidst the shifting sands of princely ambition. The lifeblood of the Holy Roman Empire pulsed not just through the veins of its princes, but also through the arteries of its burgeoning cities. Nuremberg, a jewel of Franconia, epitomized this rise. Its strategic location along major trade routes, coupled with the industriousness of its citizens, transformed it into a major economic power. Augsburg, home to the Fugger banking dynasty, became synonymous with wealth and influence. Their financial acumen and willingness to lend to emperors and kings alike elevated them to a position of unparalleled power within the empire. The Fuggers' reach extended across Europe, shaping the political landscape through their control of capital. Frankfurt, the site of imperial elections and a vital trade hub, thrived on its central location and the privileges granted by successive emperors. The Frankfurt Mess, or trade fair, drew merchants from across Europe, transforming the city into a vibrant center of exchange and innovation. These free imperial cities operated with a degree of autonomy unheard of in much of feudal Europe. Ruled by councils of wealthy merchants and guild masters, they jealously guarded their privileges and resisted the encroachment of both emperor and princes. The emperors, often in need of funds for their own ventures, were forced to grant concessions to these powerful cities. Rudolf of Habsburg, ever pragmatic, understood the value of their support, but also recognized the potential threat they posed to imperial authority. The princes, envious of the city's wealth and autonomy, frequently clashed with them. Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, like many of his peers, resented the economic power that bypassed his control, seeking to extract tolls and taxes whenever possible. The cities often formed leagues and alliances to protect their interests. The Hanseatic League, dominated by North German cities, became a formidable force, controlling trade routes and wielding significant political influence throughout the region. The papacy, ever seeking to undermine imperial power, often sided with the cities against the emperor and his princes, offering them protection in exchange for loyalty and financial support. The cities were not immune to conflict. Besieged and attacked by ambitious princes, they often had to defend their freedom with force. The strength of their walls and the determination of their citizens were tested time and again. Even Frederick II, despite his grand ambitions, recognized the importance of the cities. He granted charters and privileges, hoping to harness their economic power for his own benefit, while simultaneously weakening the power of the territorial princes. The guilds, powerful organizations of craftsmen and merchants, played a crucial role in the city's economic success. They regulated production, ensured quality, and protected the interests of their members, contributing to the overall prosperity of the urban centers. The free imperial cities, scattered across the map of the Holy Roman Empire, represented a unique phenomenon. Independent and prosperous, they stood as a testament to the power of commerce and the enduring spirit of self-governance in a fragmented realm. They were a force to be reckoned with, their wealth and influence shaping the destiny of the empire. The ancient conflict between the church and the crown continued to simmer, a perpetual struggle for dominance over the souls and lands of Christendom. Pope Innocent IV, a man unyielding in his conviction, saw the Holy Roman Empire as a divinely sanctioned entity, but one ultimately subservient to papal authority. Emperor Frederick II, ever the defiant sovereign, bristled at the Pope's assertion of supremacy. He viewed the empire as a secular institution, divinely ordained but independent of Rome's direct control. His ambition to unite Italy under imperial rule directly challenged papal interests and temporal power in the Italian peninsula. In a move that reverberated throughout the empire, Pope Innocent IV excommunicated Frederick II, declaring him a heretic and releasing his subjects from their oaths of fealty. This act, a weapon wielded many times before, struck at the very foundation of Frederick's authority and ignited further discord within the already fractured empire. Frederick, ever resilient, refused to yield. He rallied his supporters, both within and outside the empire, and waged war against papal forces in Italy. The conflict became a brutal and protracted struggle, draining the resources of both the empire and the papacy. Across the Holy Roman Empire, the excommunication sowed division. Some princes, like Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, reluctantly obeyed the Pope's decree, while others remained loyal to Frederick, seeing the papal intervention as an overreach of power and attack on the empire's independence. The German princes, ever wary of centralized power, saw in the conflict an opportunity to further assert their own autonomy. The Pope's actions weakened the emperor's authority, allowing them to extract concessions and solidify their control over their own territories. At the Council of Lyon, Pope Innocent IV formally deposed Frederick II, further escalating the conflict. This unprecedented act demonstrated the papacy's immense political power and its willingness to directly challenge the authority of the Holy Roman Emperor. Despite the papal condemnation and the growing opposition within the empire, Frederick II remained defiant. He continued to govern his domains and wage war in Italy, refusing to acknowledge the Pope's authority over secular matters. His intellectual prowess and political acumen allowed him to maintain a semblance of control, even in the face of immense pressure. The war between Frederick and Innocent raged on, leaving a trail of devastation across Italy. Cities were sacked, alliances shifted, and the landscape was scarred by the relentless conflict. The people suffered immensely as the two great powers clashed for supremacy. As the power struggle between the papacy and the emperor continued to weaken the imperial authority, ambitious princes like Rudolph of Habsburg focused on consolidating power within their own territories. The dream of a unified empire faded further as regional interests took precedence over imperial ambitions. The legacy of the investiture controversy, the historical struggle over the appointment of bishops, continued to cast a long shadow over the empire. The unresolved tensions between secular and religious authority contributed to the ongoing fragmentation and instability. The conflict between church and crown left a lasting mark on the Holy Roman Empire. The struggle for power, the excommunications, and the deposition of emperors all contributed to the empire's enduring fragmentation, ensuring that the dream of a unified and powerful realm would remain elusive for centuries to come. While the papacy had secured its authority, it had inadvertently weakened the empire. The winds of religious dissent, long whispered in hushed tones, now howled across the Holy Roman Empire. Nowhere was this more evident than in Bohemia, where the teachings of Jan Hus had taken root, blossoming into open revolt against both the church and the established order. Emperor Wenceslaus IV, King of Bohemia, vacillated, unable to stem the tide. The Hussite wars were about to begin. Jan Hus, a priest and scholar, had challenged the authority of the church, decrying its corruption and advocating for a return to biblical principles. His execution at the Council of Constance in 1415 only served to inflame his followers, transforming religious disagreement into armed resistance. The 4 Articles of Prague became their banner: freedom of preaching, communion under both kinds, poverty of the clergy, and punishment of mortal sins. The Hussites, though lacking in formal military training, proved a formidable foe. Under the leadership of skilled generals like Jan Žižka, they pioneered innovative tactics, employing Wagenburg's mobile fortifications of wagons to devastating effect against the heavily armored knights of the empire. Their faith fueled their courage, and their ingenuity compensated for their lack of resources. The Hussite wars sent shockwaves throughout the Holy Roman Empire. The repeated defeats suffered by imperial armies exposed the empire's military weaknesses and the deep divisions among its constituent territories. The electors, alarmed by the unrest, gathered in Vienna to discuss a response. The question was not whether to act, but how. Unity was proving as elusive as victory on the battlefield. Crusade after crusade was launched against the Hussites, each ending in humiliating defeat for the imperial forces. The Hussites, fighting for their faith and their freedom, proved unyielding. The cries for reform echoed beyond Bohemia, stirring discontent in other parts of the empire. The old order was crumbling, and the scent of rebellion was in the air. The rise of heresy was not confined to Bohemia. In the Rhineland, whispers of Waldenism and other dissenting beliefs circulated among the populace. Archbishop Engelbert of Cologne, a staunch defender of the Church, preached against these heresies, warning of the dangers of straying from the true faith. But his words often fell on deaf ears, as many felt alienated from the Church's wealth and power. The association of the emperor with the Church made him a target for the Hussites and other dissenters. Imperial authority, already weakened by the interregnum and the rise of powerful princes, suffered a further blow. The image of the emperor, once a symbol of unity and strength, was now tarnished by association with a church seen as corrupt and oppressive. The papacy, too, felt the sting of the Hussite revolt. The challenge to papal authority in Bohemia threatened the Church's spiritual and temporal power. Pope Innocent IV, from his seat in Rome, condemned the Hussites as heretics and called for their suppression. But his calls were increasingly ignored, as the princes of the empire prioritized their own interests over the dictates of the Church. The free cities of the empire, already wary of the princes and the emperor, saw the Hussite wars as an opportunity to assert their independence. They began to form leagues and alliances to protect their trade routes and their autonomy. The spirit of self-reliance and resistance was spreading, challenging the traditional feudal order. Even Rudolf of Habsburg, focused on consolidating his own power, recognized the need for a negotiated settlement to the Hussite wars. Prolonged conflict drained resources and destabilized the empire. He initiated peace talks with the Hussites, seeking a compromise that would restore order and prevent further bloodshed. But the path to peace was fraught with obstacles, as both sides struggled to reconcile their deeply held beliefs. The Hussite wars, though eventually brought to a close through uneasy compromises, left a lasting scar on the Holy Roman Empire. Bohemia remained a land divided, with Hussites and Catholics living side by side in a state of perpetual tension. The empire's authority was further weakened, and the forces of fragmentation continued to gain strength. The religious dissent and political upheaval of the Hussite wars exposed the deep fault lines within the Holy Roman Empire. The dream of a unified and powerful empire faded further into the distance, replaced by the reality of competing loyalties, regional autonomy, and the enduring struggle for power between the emperor, the princes, and the free cities. The fragile crown teetered precariously, its future uncertain. The Holy Roman Empire, a tapestry of principalities and free cities, faced not only internal divisions but also external forces that shaped its destiny. Among these was the Hanseatic League, a mercantile powerhouse that carved out its own sphere of influence within and beyond the empire's borders. Born from the need for mutual protection and trade facilitation, the Hanseatic League began as a loose association of North German towns. Cities like Lübeck, Hamburg, Bremen, and Cologne united to defend their interests against piracy, unfair tolls, and restrictive trade practices. The League's economic power soon translated into political influence. Princes and even emperors found themselves negotiating with the Hanseatic cities, seeking alliances or access to the League's vast resources. Rudolf of Habsburg, ever pragmatic, understood the importance of maintaining good relations with these powerful merchants. The Hanseatic League established trade networks stretching from London to Novgorod, controlling the flow of vital commodities such as timber, grain, furs, and fish. Their ships dominated the Baltic Sea, and their merchants established trading posts in key cities across northern and eastern Europe. The League's autonomy often clashed with the ambitions of territorial princes. Disputes over trade rights, tariffs, and jurisdiction led to frequent conflicts, testing the empire's ability to maintain order and enforce its laws. The Hanseatic League was known to defend its interests with force, maintaining its own armies and navies. The rise of the Hanseatic League presented a challenge to the traditional feudal order of the Holy Roman Empire. While the emperor claimed ultimate authority, the League operated largely independently, collecting its own taxes, enforcing its own laws, and conducting its own foreign policy. The League's economic success attracted merchants from across Europe, fostering a vibrant exchange of goods and ideas. Hanseatic cities became centers of innovation and cultural exchange, contributing to the intellectual and artistic ferment of the late Middle Ages. The Hanseatic League's decentralized structure mirrored that of the Holy Roman Empire itself. Each city retained its autonomy, but the League provided a framework for cooperation and collective action, enabling them to achieve goals that no single city could accomplish alone. Even powerful emperors like Frederick II had to acknowledge the Hanseatic League's power. Treaties were signed, granting the League special privileges and exemptions in exchange for their support or neutrality in imperial conflicts. The balance of power within the empire continued to shift, with the League emerging as a significant player. The League's military strength ensured its survival in a turbulent world. Hanseatic fleets patrolled the Baltic Sea, suppressing piracy and challenging rival powers. Their naval power was a key factor in maintaining their dominance over trade routes. The Hanseatic League's influence extended even to the papacy. Popes sought the League's financial support and diplomatic assistance, further blurring the lines between secular and religious authority within the empire. The Hanseatic League, though not formally a part of the Holy Roman Empire, exerted a profound influence on its political and economic landscape. Its rise demonstrated the limits of imperial authority and the growing power of independent actors within the fragmented realm. The League's story is a testament to the enduring power of commerce and cooperation in shaping the course of history. The dream of a centralized Holy Roman Empire, so passionately pursued by Frederick II, ultimately proved elusive. His ambition clashed with the entrenched powers of the princes and the unwavering opposition of the papacy, laying the groundwork for future fragmentation. The papacy, under the unwavering guidance of figures like Innocent IV, relentlessly challenged imperial authority. The conflict between secular and religious power became a defining characteristic of the empire, weakening its central control. The interregnum, a period of imperial vacancy, exposed the inherent weaknesses of the elective system. The subsequent rise of the Habsburgs marked a shift in imperial focus, prioritizing dynastic power over centralized governance. The rise of powerful free cities like Nuremberg and Cologne further eroded imperial control. These cities, with their economic strength and self-governing institutions, asserted their independence and resisted imperial interference. The College of Electors, wielding the power to choose the emperor, became a formidable force in imperial politics. Their increasing influence ensured that the imperial office remained weak and dependent on their support, further fragmenting power. The Habsburg emperors, like Rudolf I, learned to navigate the complex political landscape of the empire, focusing on consolidating their own dynastic power rather than pursuing unrealistic dreams of centralized control. The investiture controversy, though seemingly resolved, left a lasting legacy of tension between the Church and the Empire. The papacy continued to assert its independence, limiting the emperor's authority over ecclesiastical matters. Social unrest and peasant revolts, fueled by economic hardship and resentment against the nobility, further destabilized the empire and weakened its central authority. The Hanseatic League and other city alliances fostered trade and economic cooperation, but also created independent power centers that challenged imperial authority. The Hussite Wars exposed the empire's vulnerability to external threats and internal dissent. The religious conflict further fragmented the empire and challenged its authority. The Holy Roman Empire, a complex tapestry of competing interests and fragmented power, never achieved true political unity. Its legacy is one of enduring tensions between centralized authority and regional autonomy. Despite its fragmentation, the Holy Roman Empire continued to exist for centuries, a testament to its symbolic importance and its unique place in European history. It served as a reminder of the enduring tension between the ideal of a unified Christendom and the reality of decentralized power.